you go to a lawyer to get answers. Quite often you go to hear questions. Anyway, very welcome to have you all. And so who's going to be the courageous person to make the first comment?
I will.
Kevin, representing Jasper Wyman and Sons. We saw you at Vernon River, and you were in the front row then too.
And I'm not here to talk against the act or for the act, but I'd like to lay out a few facts, I guess, is where I'm coming from. PEI is very unique by having this Land Act in comparison to any other province in Canada or United States for that matter. And maybe in the day it had its place, and maybe it was very, very worthwhile. But the question keeps posing itself continuously, whether you be a corporation, you be an individual landowner, or you be a family farm, is does this act limit profitability? Does it limit competition? And is it really free enterprise? PEI has three things. There's three things that are staples to life, right? Water, food, and trees. And PEI has those. And they are also the three strongholds for creating employment in this province. And the key to a strong community or a strong province is employment, is it not? If we don't have any employment here, where do we all go? Out west or Labrador or wherever the heck we're going to go. But that's where we're going to go. So to create and maintain employment, you have to have profitability. You cannot create employment without profitability. It just doesn't work. And so one of the, coming back to the limiting profitability, competition, and enterprise, one of the questions that comes into my mind in the short few years that I've lived on Prince Edward Island is if I had a bag full of cash, I can go into Charlottetown and I can buy all the houses I want, I can buy all the restaurants I want, I can buy all the apartment buildings I want, I can buy all the cottages I want, and that's for profitability, for my income. But if I want to farm profitably on PEI, I'm restricted. I only have a certain limit that I can go. And just so that you put that in perspective a little bit more, every enterprise, doesn't matter what enterprise it is, in agriculture or in forestry and in fishing, every sector has a different scale of size of operation. And I'll point this out for example. If I have a strawberry farm and a raspberry farm and high bush blueberries, I can probably maintain a decent income on 50 less acres. But if I'm going to grow low bush blueberries and it takes me 20 years to get an established blueberry field, and I'm going to be a profitable individual growing blueberries, I have to have 1,000 plus acres in order to be profitable. So that's just a little bit of perspective. Also, we have to remember that we're in a global marketplace now. So what we used to do 30 years ago when this act was put in place, we used to sell to the local ones like McKenna's potatoes and these ones and these small ones all over the place and go to the farmer's market and so on. Today we got big processors, and those processors control the majority of the market share, but they're also producing a product that the marketplace is demanding with certain qualities that they're asking for. So in order to receive enough of that quality product into your processing operation of any description, you have to have a certain amount of control by the processor in order to be able to say, this is what the marketplace is demanding, these are the things that we have to have. So yes, we can grow 10 acres of potatoes and a few acres and go to the farmer's market, and that's all wonderful and good for the people that can do that. But in the general scope of things, in the economy that we live in, we have to be globally minded. We have to think about the future and where it's going to go. So under the current act, back 30 years ago, what was the ownership trends on PEI? Family farm, individual, bunch of kids helping out in the barns, doing this, doing that, doing all these kind of things. But what about our society today? How do we want to do it today? We want to go on a holiday. We want our people to be able to take time off. We have to pay them. We have to establish all these roads. In order to do that, we have to be profitable. And in being profitable, we have to be a certain size in order to accommodate. So it doesn't matter whether you're 50 acres and you have to go to 52 acres, or you're 1,000 acres and got to go to 1,020 acres. It doesn't matter. The scale of things is basically all the same thing. So in order to maintain that kind of lifestyle that we live in today, there's going to be lots of different things that are going to take place. You know, how many people in here, there's very few that got people that from their own family that are actually on the farm today. And what about, you think about down the road, what about 10 years from now? What if we want to sell the farm? What if we want to retire? What if us gets sick and we need to bail out? Who's going to be there that's going to be able to absorb that, to buy that, to purchase that? We have to think about all those factors. They all come into play. Because of the beauty and the nature of Prince Edward Island, we got another problem here, and that was addressed in the old act, or it was tried to be addressed in the old act. We got a lot of absentee landowners on this province, people that got cottages, people that got a bit of acreage they want to keep around their cottage, and they don't live here. But there's a lot of rent in, rent out, things like that that's going on. So in order to establish that, we have to take a look at that. And one of the problems is right now, and I think Horace addressed it, or mentioned it anyways, that back when the act was first instilled, farmers, as long as you could show that you were a bona fide farmer, you didn't have to go through all the red tape and the IRAC and the whole 9 yards in order to be able to get a piece of land purchased and sold and whatever.
As long as you're within the limits, you didn't have to do that.
As long as you're within the
Yep.
limits, yeah. So now, today, if I wanted to, if our corporation decided we wanted to sell a piece of land, I got two problems. One problem is that I got to go through all the red tape. The second is I went through with our corporation the provision that's in place now to take land out of land holdings that's not feasible for agriculture. But when you do that, you also put yourself into another situation where you got to have so many years before you can actually get it all cleared up to resell it again. So if I wanted to sell some of that land to somebody like Island Nature Trust, or give it to Island Nature Trust or Ducks Unlimited or something like that, I got to go through a bit of a situation in order to get that out. So that's another part of it. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in getting rid of the red tape and trying to cut down on the amount of bureaucracy that's involved with it. It takes a lot to do it. Under the current act, one of the things that's been forced upon farmers, and I mentioned this at the Vernon River meeting, is that if you have 1,000 acres and you're growing potatoes, for example, and you want to do a 3-year rotation or a 4-year rotation, which is good stewardship practice, that's what we want to do. If we want to grow a little bit, we're not able to grow without purchasing more land. So what happened in the 80s? We've seen it happen everywhere on Prince Edward Island. We were cutting down trees, we were clearing land, and then what did we see this fall? Some of that same land that we cut the trees down, cleared it out back in the day, was too wet to harvest potatoes off of it because it really wasn't super suitable for the production. But we had to use it because we had to keep ourselves within the land limits, and it was ours, right? So we used what's ours. So the old act kind of took away from good stewardship practices from my perspective on it. And I think everybody would consent to that. I mean, if you had the opportunity to go and purchase 15 or 100 or 20 acres, it's good productive land, or you had to clear it and get it ready and pick the sticks off it and do all the things to it, it's more profitable to go buy that piece of land that was good in the first place. So, and that was good stewardship practice. So that's really all I've got to say. As far as the company is concerned, we're a growing company on Prince Edward Island. We want to be a growing company on Prince Edward Island. It takes 20 years, and I have actually the figures all, if somebody wants to ever figure it out. I figured it out the other day. It takes you in year 19, if you take a piece of, and this is just for an example, if you take a piece of blueberry land that's treed and you do all the right things to it to make it into a profitable blueberry farm, in year 19, without paying any interest, you're still $438 in the hole per acre. So you got to think about how long it takes to be a profitable in that business. Now, potatoes is a little different, corn's a little different, beans is a little different, dairy's a little different. You know, so every sector has its own little niche. Like you take a broiler operation, for example. I'll just use that one for an example. You could have 6 or 7 broiler barns on a 200-acre piece of ground, just enough to get rid of the manure in good stewardship practice. But that's all you need. But you've got a very profitable operation if you've got the quota and you've got it paid for. So in comparison, you got to weigh it all together. Our take is on it is that we would like to see the act looked at quite substantially. And as far from my personal point of view, I would like to see something more in regards to Stewardship Act that protects good rotation, reforestation, all the things that go into keeping our water, keeping our land, and keeping our trees. That's all I got to say.
But before you go now, you were reading from some notes there.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be awful nice to have those.
You can have them.
Than you.
I'll make them up for you better than that.
Well, we'll take them for now like that.
And anybody that does want to know the figures to that, I can give it to them. I figured it all out step by step, and that's what it is.
Okay. Now, Kevin, Jasper Wyman's been here about 15 years now,
Yes.
personally. And during that period of time, you've grown some blueberries yourselves,
Yes.
and then you buy from local people.
Yes.
Do you also bring berries across the bridge?
Yes.
Okay. And the whole situation, it's the family are satisfied, the people who own the company are satisfied with being in Prince Edward Island?
Love Prince Edward Island.
Okay.
We had the board of just so you know, we had the board of directors here this year. First time that the board of directors that own the company were ever on Prince Edward Island all together at one time. Loved it.
Is Mr. Flanagan still the
Yes, he is.
CEO? Okay.
But there is some problems.
Okay.
If everybody in this room can grow blueberries for me, I'd be happy and do it the way that we need them for the marketplace that we need to sell them into. I'd be more than happy to buy the berries from you and not grow them myself.
Mm-hmm. And what are you doing to encourage people to do that, to grow berries for you more than what you have now?
It's hard
Yeah.
because you need such deep pockets.
Okay. All right, we'll let you go and we'll take your paper. Get the paper. If we don't get the paper now, we don't get it usually too soon, my experience has been. Okay. All right. Okay. Others, at some point in time, I'm going to direct your attention a little bit towards some maps, but we'll just see how the evening goes. There's some interesting maps there, and we've had them at all of our meetings, and they haven't generated much comment. But before the evening's over, I want to raise some matters pertaining there too. Okay. Now, you can respond or make comments with Kevin has said, or your own thoughts. Kevin just was in the front row, and he just jumped over there, and I appreciate that, taking the initiative. Somebody else? Alvin Keenan, new president of the Federation of Agriculture.
Just to break the ice a little bit, Kevin, in the blueberry industry, a question I think is how many acres of blueberries are grown on PEI now? And I'm not comparing it to the potato industry, but I sometimes wonder what the acreage is that will fit the marketplace and our environment too, to stand the load. And on blueberries, how many acres is grown on PEI approximately? If that's a fair question, because I know your tonnage can change per acre, and you're not selling acres, you're selling tonnage. I realize that, and quality. But what do you think that PEI could stand for blueberry acreage? Because, i.e., because I know the more acreage we have, and the more load we have, sometimes some of the pests we have to deal with get out of control too. So I don't know if that's a question that you want to that you can answer even, or if there is an answer to it.
Well, right now, I don't know if there's any real accurate, 100% accurate blueberry acreage on Prince Edward Island. What some people call blueberry acreage is, to my estimation, is not blueberry acres, it's still trees. So, I think that as far as how many acres can it sustain Prince Edward Island, anything that never had a potato in the last 75 to 80 years probably could grow blueberries on Prince Edward Island if they wanted to, whether it be in trees or whether it be in the farmland, anything that the pH is low enough in. So, yeah, this province really could be just like Maine, I guess, if you really wanted to say it could. But to be honest with you, as far as the marketplace right now, the market can stand as much berries as we can put there. Price is not going to, something like potatoes, the price is not always going to be exactly what you think it's going to be way up there, just because the market's demanding it, because the economic climate in every other part of the world is in such array. So as far as the market is concerned, it's good. In regards to the environment, one of the beauties about the wild blueberries, in particular, is that yes, we do spray. So don't get it wrong that we don't spray. But we do not turn any land over. It never ever gets turned over. So that land, there's never ever open to red soil. It's never open to wind erosion. So there is a lot of potential to having. In regards to insects is a huge problem. Doesn't matter what you grow. As you get bigger and larger in any sector, it becomes a problem. And just so everybody's aware too, the blueberry industry, or our company, also is beekeepers. So we're also very aware of what we need to have for landscape in this province of Prince Edward Island. Right now, there's probably, I wouldn't go to say exactly what the acreage is, but in the eastern part of PEI, we're probably at the limits of the amount of bees that we can sustain in eastern PEI right now, because there's no food source in the spring and the fall for those bees without feeding them. So unless you're going to go up to the Hunter River area and all up through there, you're not going to be able to sustain it. So what I said right at the very beginning, water and food and trees, we need it to sustain everything, and that's the staple for it all.
Like, I know there are a couple of blueberry growers in the room. I was talking to several of you before. As a youth, trying to make a few extra coins on the farm in Hazelbrook, I went out to try to find a few boxes of berries along the CNR tracks, or the most derelict farm in the community in back. But I found it an awful lot easier to put strawberries in a box and raspberries in a box than blueberries. It took a long time to fill a box. Somebody else? Well, while you're thinking, I want to direct your attention to these maps, if I could.
About 10% of the island's land area. Now, over 16,000 non-resident owned properties. So we're talking property parcel numbers now, and we're not talking acreage, of which about a quarter border the coastline. Now, this map over here, and I apologize if you have to twist, I'll try to get out of the way. This has to do with corporate properties in Prince Edward Island. And one of you was looking at this corporate is a little confusing. And I am prepared to acknowledge that that's so, except that that's the word that's used. Over 26,000 corporately owned properties in Prince Edward Island, which account for 456,000 acres of land, which is about a third of the total island land area. And just remember now, that's owned properties here. Now corporate, that could be a company, and I don't own any land, and I don't own any shares in a company that owns land. But if my wife and I and our son decided to have a corporation, then that could be us. It's very much a family, but it's still a corporation. Now, of this 2,600 of the corporate properties are non-resident owned, and that accounts for 27,000 acres. And I know that some of those things produce questions, and we are going to get some additional information. And you don't have to talk about it right now, but I really do hope that before the evening is over, that we will, in addition to the topics we've already heard tonight, and will, I'm sure, hear at other meetings, and what we've heard at a couple of meetings already, I'd like to hear some comments about this matter of non-resident ownership of land that doesn't relate to farmland and to limits and to bureaucracy and red tape and so forth, whether that, you have any comments on that. And to just give you an example, that if you were a non-resident Prince Edward Island and a non-resident Prince Edward Island, or to reverse it, a resident Prince Edward Island is someone who has to be here for 183 days per year. And those two guys in the front row just caused me trouble. I ran the roads with them a long time ago, and they're just here to cause me trouble. And I've got nothing to do with the Senate of Canada whatsoever. But it's 183 days, and it doesn't mean it has to be consecutive, because it doesn't say that. Okay? And if you come here, if I lived in Halifax and I wanted to buy some property here, then I can buy up to 5 acres of land. Kevin, you going to ask a question?
I wonder how many acres of land is owned by non-profit, the wetlands and the Island Nature Trust and all that.
I'll answer that in a moment if I could.
Okay.
I sort of answered that one meeting already, but I will do it again. So if I come here and I want to buy some land, I can buy up to 5 acres of land without getting approval from the Executive Council. And I can buy up to 165 feet of shore frontage without getting Executive Council approval. Now, we all think of shore frontages all along here, except the Act doesn't define it. And IRAC has more or less taken the position that shore frontage means water frontage means stream frontage. So if I want to jump over a stream and there's 2 feet of water going through a farm that's way in here, but that is something that will probably need clarification. And my wife could do the same thing. Okay. Now, if I want to buy more than that, then what happens is, I say, I've got 50 acres here, and the person will only sell 50 acres, and that's the parcel I want. Then the owner, if he's been advertising that for a period of time, and he hasn't had any local bids or that he's accepted to, then I will submit an offer. The owner will accept it, and then it has to go through IRAC. And my lawyer has to take care of the application. It's somewhat lengthy, but not too bad. And the details of the advertising have to be there. And an application fee has to be submitted. And the application is the hire of $550 or 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $200,000 property, then it's $2,000 that you submit. Okay? It goes to IRAC, and they keep all of the fee. They process it, and it's a closed hearing, and they do what their thing, and then after that they give a recommendation to Executive Council. You don't know what person who is a resident here can sell or convey property to members of their family without getting IRAC approval. And if you dance around and hop around a little bit enough and go through various whatevers, you can sometimes avoid having to go to IRAC, all very legal. Okay? Any questions on that, what I just said? I'm hoping that those comments, Greg.
Are there any statistics on the corporations or individuals that are publicly available that might show how many are already at the maximum land holding limit?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are above a certain amount of acreage, then you have to apply every year and so forth. And so those types of, that type of information is available. One of the things that we're finding out is that some of the, I think I'm correct in this, Patrick, this is Patrick Carroll, he's assisting me, he's with the planning office, but he's been fully seconded over to my direction and no longer takes authority, direction from the ministry, takes from me for a period of time. Is that that information is a little hard to obtain because IRAC hasn't been doing some analysis for the past number of years in some of these things. And it would be helpful if there had been more recent analysis in some of these regards. There are an awful lot of questions along those lines that you could ask, Greg, and the answers become slightly different with ever so slight change in the fact situation or the question. One of the things that's becoming apparent to me is that I think there needs to be some more detailed data and information made available in some of that area. Now that is supposed to encourage conversation.
Sure. Mr. McKinnon.
Thanks very much. Everybody hear me? My voice usually doesn't need a microphone. Anyway, my name's Danny McKinnon, and I'm a fifth-generation dairy farmer. Our family's been in business for roughly 153 years in the community of Brooklyn. My mother was a carver. She milked cows until she was 71 years old. And along with one sister, and she had 4 sisters that were all dairy farmers. They all milk cows. And the 6th generation of our farm at the moment is finishing his last year at university, and he hopes to join our organization also. And as I go down the road of our community, and all the roads of our community, we're down to about one surviving farm on every one of these roads, from 318 right through 317, 318, 316, the whole works of us are getting pretty well down to one operation per road. So we've had quite a culling process since, back in the days of the Land Protection Act that was put in. I might give a little history and hope it don't bore anybody, but I'm a firm believer that you got to know where you came from to know where you're going to. To know where you're going to, and back in when the Angus McLean campaigned to be Premier in 1979, I was a civil servant under, working as a civil servant, and one of his, he won that election, my understanding on 2 big promises, and number 1 was rural renaissance.
Although he never used the words himself, everyone attributed them to him.
Everybody attributed to him. And the red tape situation that developed under the Comprehensive Development Plan. And being a civil servant at that point in my life, I was, dealing with that red tape. So I knew what everybody was talking about at the time, and then, that was 1979, and then 1982 we get the Lands Protection Act, and the red tape came with it, so it was a little bit ironic. But the point I make over the years is, the rural renaissance in my time was indeed the Comprehensive Development Plan, and we made reference in our last meeting to Dundas Farms and putting the hold on them gaining land holdings. But Dundas Farms came here in 1968, and they were in the they were on the wind down by 82 by the time the Land Protection Act came in, and it was really that the family farm program under comprehensive development plan that slowed the situation of Dundas Farms picking up our rural farms here. Because in the 1960s, this neck of the woods was in a situation where we were poor, and the farms were in a situation where they needed capital investment, and there was nowhere to get it. The bank wouldn't give it to us. FCC was formed in the late 1950s to provide capital to a farm that the banks couldn't give. But you know, in them times, if I may, a lot of our farms, in order to qualify for mortgages to have capital put back in or reinvest them, a lot of them had to go through title tax because the generations had never properly passed them down. So, you know, being that what is may, my point there is during that time in my life, the money reinvested in through the Comprehensive Development Plan built some nice, strong family farms in PEI right across the province, and I worked for the Department of Agriculture. And I must say, I was see Don here tonight too. You know, it was a pretty nice time to be working with farmers. It was a pretty nice time to be working with farmers and see them growing and seeing some decent buildings being put over the top of our livestock and some really going ahead farm practices. And those family farms, you know, stayed fairly solid here, and then the 1990s hit. And the global marketplace, free trade agreements, and boom, we had a boom. And the Lands Protection Act couldn't stop that boom from starting to trim a lot of those family farms, because we lost in the dairy industry in PEI a considerable amount of farm operations in the 1990s to the lack of availability of forage land because of the potato. And I've had friends, you know, I had friends of ours in that time who would drive down the road and see their new meadows being plowed under to grow potatoes in. And we had a major culling of small farm.
I'm sorry, Danny. Danny, you had a major, pardon me, what?
Culling.
Culling,
We had
yeah, culling.
farms
I
that
just couldn't hear the
died
word.
because they couldn't compete. Dairy farmers, we were in a supply management situation, but we just couldn't compete for forage land with you know, the boom in the potato industry and the boom in the hog industry too, because the hog industry was building to you know, to ship pigs to Asia, and this place was a boom. It was boom, and then the Asian economy crashed, and it crashed. And Cavendish Farm had freezers full of French fries. This fish processor next door had a freezer full of lobster. Clayton Bulpett had a barn full of pigs, and they were worth nothing. The whole worst was worth nothing. And that was back, what was it, like 2001, 99, 2001 in that area, where that crash came.
That'd be about 10 years ago.
And then on top of that, we got Wart in the potato industry, we got PVYN, you know, and we checked a lot of the folks that the Land Protection Act was indeed protected. They're gone. They're gone. And the hog industry has never recovered from that crash. The potato industry is not really recovered from it, but it has. There has been a lot of the good, solid operations that, you know, indeed have stayed. And my point from that is those operations are what fueling the economy of this neck of the woods. Because this neck of the woods right now, our economy is slack. And it's slack. And what we've done in the dairy industry, from my perspective, Pius can correct me if he has another view, but as opposed to what happened in the 1990s where, you know, we were losing our forage land. Today we have built relationships with the people that are big landowners. Dairy farmers have a tendency not to be big landowners. landowners, and the Land Protection Act in our own right doesn't affect very many of us. We've been in business for 153 years and still only farm 600 acres or less. And, you know, we're not big users of land. But I wouldn't like to guess at the figure of the amount of milk that's produced in this province from forage that is produced from the potato industry. And it's a lot. It's a lot of milk that's produced because we develop relationships. And I have relationships with, and our farm is really dependent on our relationships we have not only with our neighbors and our neighbors and the potato industry, but those relationships are what help, you know, us survive. We had relationships with the hog industry, and it really stressed our farm out when that hog industry went south and PPI, it stressed us out. So my point in the end of the whole thing is you know, we have to look at the operations that are surviving in this province because they're fueling our economy and the economy from this end of the province. From my point of view, can't suffer from the people that are in business, that are providing, that are fueling our economy, providing jobs to our people. We have to, we can't, you know, stemming those operations by legislation such as this. We have to really, you know, be cognizant of what those operations are up against, because not only, you know, we, as a farming community, I think we've developed good enough relations to with those people that, as Robert McDonald said the other night, I don't care who owns the land, I'm sick of music. And if, you know, if I can get some forage from a potato farmer, if he has more than 1,000 or 3,000 acres, be that what it may, all, you know, what I'm interested in is what I have to do to keep my operation running. Thank you very much, Mr. Carter, for the opportunity to
Okay.
say something.
All right, just don't sit down yet, please. Thank you very much, Denny. So I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying, that you, as a dairy farmer, are not interested in getting big, but you're very interested in those individuals who you have built good relationships with that are, quote, fueling the economy in the area in which you live. You feel for what they're saying, and you would like to see some changes made for them and not for you. Is that right?
I will benefit from the changes you make for them if they survive. I will too.
Okay, but you're not seeking a benefit for increased acreage for a dairy farmer. You are for potato farmers, to pick on them for a moment. Is that right?
Oh, yes, potato farmers or anybody that is fueling the workforce that keeps this
Okay.
town running.
Well, let's carry the conversation on a little bit further then. What type of suggestions are you making that the changes should amount to?
I'm not so sure whether the whole thing should be thrown wide open or not. I don't know whether I'm a proponent of that. I really haven't made up my mind on that. Regardless, my experience in the dairy industry with the quota situation or dairy industry, every time we try to control what happens quota price-wise or availability-wise, someone finds a loophole. And, or the lawyers and accountants make money. And here nor there, I guess my situation is we really have to look at probably letting go of trying to control the amount of paper some of these people are using. It's just, you know, it's, I don't think red tape-wise we can control it anyway, to be honest with you, Mr. Carver. I really we have a crop rotation act in this province. We have a crop rotation act in this province, which, you know, was another, was something else that evolved from the boom of the 90s. Like, you know, if we bore you too much history, you know, one of the up-and-coming young men in the Haines Plains government was a dear friend of mine by the name Pat Benz, who became premier. And, you know, we talked about the red tape of the 80s, and when the history books are written, his administration will be the one that has imposed more regulations on farmers than any other administration in the history of the province. We've got the land, we've got the 3-year Crop Rotations Act, Buffer Zone Act, pesticide certification, and that all was stimulated from the fact in the 1990s there was booms, and there was a lot of land, you know. If the potato industry may have had availability to more than their limits of land at that time, the land might not have gotten abused to the point where we had to regulate buffer zones and such things at the time. But it was those types of things that stimulate these other regulations that came upon us. Was the land, there was a controlled amount of land that everybody can use, but there was money in, you know, for the first time in a long time in the potato industry, there was good money in producing potatoes. So every inch of land had a potato in it. And of course, we end up into fish kills and the whole works from that. And then, well, we regulate the land to, we have to put regulations in to try and stop that. And when those regulations get in, then of course a lot of land's not used. Well, as you said the other night, instead of, you know, you have to go through red tape to get that taken out of your land limits. And again, that's just what I've seen from it. And, you know, trying to regulate this thing is, it just, we're regulating ourselves into more regulation. It can become, you know, a frustrating situation and stymies the growth of our economy.
Could I just ask you a couple of questions? I'm going to bypass the comment about the lawyers, because the lawyers are always asked to do with the clients.
Well, you're a lawyer and I had to make a comment.
That's all right.
I chose to be a farmer, you chose to be a lawyer.
That's right. I wouldn't have made a very good farmer, maybe. I think it's a very honorable profession, but it's certainly a very challenging one. I was asking about the going to ask about the Crop Rotation Act. Do you think it's well received? What's the opinion? What's the unofficial word in the agricultural community about the Crop Rotation Act?
I'll give you my personal opinion since I'm standing up, and then I'll sit down because we've got a room full of other people here that have opinions on it. It's unfortunate in all those incidents that the people that get caught, but there's the massive amounts that don't. Plus, we have a tendency to focus on potatoes, and now with soybeans and corn being very profitable rotation crops, they're not being watched close enough. And, you know, in my personal opinion from the situation, there are soybeans that are our next, you know, that's going to be our next problem for land use, because they're, you know, in the land use that I've been involved with, soybeans have really been harder on the land than the potato crop.
Just want to ask you one final question or make a little comment. I gather what you're saying is you don't know whether we should open it all up, and I'm not sure, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, and I'm not even sure you yet know yourself whether that means wide open or not. But if you do, if the net result is of all of this process, there's no Lands Protection Act and everything is wide open, what guarantee is there that potato farmer in your area, what guarantee is that Wyman's or somebody else who are here in the province, who are domiciled in the province, who have an economic base in the province, what assurance do you have that they can compete with the millions and the billions of dollars that now exist throughout the world when it comes to buy the available land that would be for sale in Prince Edward Island?
That's a good question. And, I haven't never really put any thought, to be honest with Mr. Carver. But there's billions of dollars available to buy that land in other provinces that is more productive land than PEI, because we have precious little Class 1 land. And if you're gonna come in here and you're gonna spend that kind of money on land, you wanna make sure it's productive. And that's what our land here is not extremely high-quality land. We have a sandy silt loam, and there's precious little Class 1 land in this province. I'm farming blood and series of soil in there. And your house was built in the 1960s in Charlottetown. The foundation is made out of gravel hauled out of Brooklyn. There's hardly a person here tonight that hasn't driven on a road that has gravel hauled out of Brooklyn. It's not good land. And there's a lot of the land that is in that neck of the woods that if those people are coming in with that kind of money to invest in it, they're going to go someplace else to invest. Where there's no land protection acts in other provinces.
I think that I just make the argument necessary, whether I agree with the opinion or not. I think there is so much available corporate cash in the world. It might surprise people how quickly that could become available in Prince Edward Island if necessary. And I will come to you in a moment, Kevin. You mentioned that we have precious little Category 1 soil in the province. Having regard to that statement, I'm amazed as a lawyer through my practice how many Category 1 subdivision lots I see that are approved by the provincial planning department if we have such precious Category 1.
Well, Charlottetown series of soils, Category 1 soil.
Pardon me?
The Charlottetown series of soils is Category 1 soil, and the only other pocket is up in West Brent. It's West Brent.
Well,
We have the blood series.
I don't know how this is learning for me. I don't know how far the Charlottetown area goes, but I see a fair number of lots being approved. Calvin?
I think there's two different classifications there.
Okay.
You're speaking of the classification as far as ability to sustain a
Yes, I am.
septic system.
Yeah.
And that's not the same
Okay.
as soil that would be appropriate for crops.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
two different.
If you look at the old soil maps, you'll see where Charlottetown is and all those.
okay. Well, thank you very much. That's been very informative. We'll get a little bit better informed as a result of that tonight. Calvin?
Just a couple comments I'd like to make, and it's a concern. What Horst just said is a bit of concern that I think we all need to take into consideration in about this corporate money that's around the world. But we also have to look at ourselves individually and corporately and so on and so forth. If we're selling a piece of property, there's three reasons usually why we're selling a piece of property. One is we need money and we got to get rid of it. Two is somebody offered us an extreme amount of money that it just didn't make any sense not to sell it. And third is we got nobody to take over, or there's not going to be any future. So if you have a profitable operation, and this is what I think that we got to concentrate the most on, is making sure that we got profitable operations so that we don't have to sell it to the corporate world. Because if Neil can produce on 2,000 acres some blueberries for me, and he can make a profit, I'm not interested in buying his land, and neither is any other processor if they can buy it. But I think I know where Horst is coming from, but the bottom line is that there's a lot of influx coming into Prince Edward Island that's looking at land, and I think we're all aware of that situation. One of the things that we have to remember is that in the free enterprise world, if there was no act in this province, it'd be just like it is in Ontario. And my friend that I went to school with just finished paying $7,500 an acre for a piece of land to operate his dairy farm. And there's land that's going beyond that. But it's competitive. It's competitive. It's very competitive. Everybody's got to compete. They got to do it. And in order to be survival, they had to do what they had to do to get land. They're not going to travel to get that forage that Danny's talking about. The next thing I would say is it doesn't matter what country in the world you go to, of course. The best land is used up in houses and apartment buildings. In Ontario, for example, all down through the Niagara Peninsula, which is the best farmland in all of the province of Ontario, is houses and apartment buildings, and it continues, and it will continue. There's no land restrictions on me being able to buy as many houses or build as many houses as I want for profitability. But as a farmer, I can't go outside my limits.
You were patient a moment ago when you asked about the Island Nature Trust, and the answer to that question, as I understand it, they were getting very close a few years ago, given their maximum limit of 3,000 acres. They're a non-profit organization, and as a result of the regulation exemptions that were passed here a couple of years ago that enabled people to take out of their land holdings environmentally sensitive land, just like Wyman's, as you indicated, in Vernon the other night, taken out 1,200 acres. They did as well, and it's my understanding their land holdings are very low now. If you think of the nature of the lands that they would own, that would make sense. Thank you, and thank you for the education and the difference between Category 1 and Class 1. Others, please, comments? Neil McDonald.
Mr. Carver, when you speak of the Crop Rotation Act, what does that mean? I've been into the farming for a while, so when you say that, what does that entail? Does that mean potatoes every third year? Or what is the stipulations in that act?
Anybody would like to provide, I can't give exact knowledge or details on that. I just know that we have the Act, and I understand that there's some concerns whether it's properly being adhered to or enforced or so forth.
Horace, I think
John?
it's essentially one row crop, 1 year and 3. Unless the land is under a management plan that's approved by the Department of Agriculture, then you can have two row crops out of 5, and a row crop is potatoes. And although I don't think corn counts as a row crop.
Potatoes is a tilled crop, and that's why.
Yeah,
Corn is not.
yeah, corn's not.
And beans are not, although there was some discussion they would be.
I think that's essentially it, isn't it, Greg?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I actually asked a question yesterday to someone with Department of Agriculture. How much land do they think is following the Act, either 1 year and 3 or 2 and 5 approved management plan? They figured that 70 to 75% of the agricultural land is meeting the Act.
70%, 70 or 75% that's in use?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means,
of the agricultural land in use.
so then there's 20 or 25% that perhaps isn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
I
other
think,
comment I'd make right quick is that when people see this map, and I've had a number of farmers that mentioned this to me recently, is that people almost get all of a sudden get an idea in their head that it's corporate farms. But about 98% of the farms on PEI are family owned. They may be incorporated for business reasons, and that's an important thing for people to understand. I had a guy in the office the other day, and he said to me, I milk 25 cows, I have 300 acres of land, it's my wife and I have a son in university, but I'm incorporated. So I'm a corporate farm. So I read something the other day that somebody wrote. They said, all they're wanting to do is listen to the Federation of Agriculture or corporate farms. But our corporate farms are, all sizes. And when you look at that map, what you're seeing a lot of family farms that have incorporated for business reasons. And I hope people understand that.
and I hope I try to be fair. I was trying to, when I did that, to explain the example of my wife and my son and our son and so forth. And people incorporate, generally speaking, for two reasons. Tax reasons, and that has to do with what accountants recommend. And as a lawyer, I recommend for liability reasons that they have to, and they're increasingly, those liability reasons are extremely important in that.
And the other thing that when you get to your limits of 3,000, you have to have 3 equal shareholders.
That's right.
So you don't, all of a sudden, if you incorporate and you only have 1 shareholder, you're at 1,000, 2 shareholders
That's right.
at 2,000.
That's right.
Now, I was at a meeting yesterday, and Greg was there, and several others at a potato meeting yesterday, and I had several farmers that mentioned to me that they were in the process of either buying out an elderly parent or an older brother who was leaving the operation. So all of a sudden, you have 3 shareholders. You buy this person out, you have 2 left. You either have to bring in someone else as an equal shareholder, or you're out of compliance. The guy in the office the other day, he said, I'm buying out my 80-year-old father. He's 56. I think you're involved, actually, you know, and he said that as soon as I buy him out, I'm out of compliance, and I don't feel comfortable having to bring in an equal shareholder. So that's another intricacy that farmers are struggling with right now. With the act.
Sure.
And I'm not really sure how you...
It was a bit of an issue that I was discussing in Vernon the other evening, and someone made the quip that, well, people didn't have any problems finding shareholders for PNP. And I didn't, in the course of conversation, I didn't dwell on that point, but I've thought about it since. There is a significant difference. PNP related to directors who had preferred shares who didn't have votes. This is equal shareholders, and you have to have equal votes. And the issue that John Jameson is raising is increasingly being seen all the time as farmers age. What happens? What happens if people die suddenly? What if you happen to have a couple of unexpected deaths? In our family, we've had people don't die in the sequence that you would think they do, and it can really, we're not involved in farming, rock family planning and that type of stuff. And you get into the whole matter then of prenuptial agreements, and divorces and separation. It has a tremendous effect. It really is. And it's a matter that I'm hoping that more people will talk about and elaborate in that situation. It really gets to an issue in some ways that, without stretching the reasoning too much, is that if you're big, and whatever big is, how do you ever get small if certain fact situations happen in regards laws? And I just toss it out, and please don't interpret what I'm saying. I'm just asking questions to try and generate comments and opinions. I did see your hand, Kevin, but I'm going to see if some others would like to make comments. Chris,
Comments regarding the
you speak on whatever you wish to speak.
Okay, regarding the map.
Maybe since you're so far at the front of the room, we have you go over here. Thank you. Chris Murmas.
Regarding the maps, which they're full size there, and here much smaller here.
Yes.
But in regard to the one Prince Edward Island corporate properties, and non-resident corporations are marked in yellow, but it's hard to see because there's not much contrast in color. If they're, let's say, red or green, they would show up much better, but you really have to look to find any yellow. And I suppose the really small properties, but anyway, that's in regard to that one. The one in regard to Prince Edward Island non-resident properties, it identifies the non-resident coastal properties as red, and unless I'm colorblind, I don't see any red on the perimeter of the island. Okay, I see one little dot there, but anyway, I mean, the coastal properties have to, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a considerable percentage that are non-resident properties. That's all I have to say on this part, okay?
Well, before you go.
Okay.
Although it isn't stated there, it's my understanding from information that I've had available to me that of the approximately 16,000 non-resident owned properties in Prince Edward Island, it does say that 3,600 border the coastline, and that represents, although it's not stated on this particular map, approximately 300 to 312 miles of coastline, and that represents about 18% of the total Prince Edward Island coastline around the province.
Yes, but there's hardly any red showing on, when you look at this, and where's the red? I mean, I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's considerable percentage owned by non-residents on the coast.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll get a map that shows that more clearly. Thank you. Hi, you're in the very back there.
Hi, my name is Jackie Bourgeois.
Yes.
I am the newly hired, I guess, executive director for the Southeast Environmental Association.
Yes.
And I'm also a UPEI master's student of arts doing island studies. So I have kind of a unique interest in islands. And
If you would like to, so that you can see everybody, you can come up here.
as opposed to everybody turning this, it doesn't matter to me.
Jackie, why don't you come up?
I just,
Thank you.
I talk loud enough, I don't stand here.
That's fine. It's your choice.
So, now where was I?
You just gave your qualifications, background.
Yes, so I'm looking at islands in a kind of a unique way because we're in a unique situation where we only have a certain amount of land to work with. So a couple of the things that I wanted to bring up, I'm obviously speaking from an environmental stewardship and sustainability perspective. Like to bring up a couple of different things. One is there any thinking or consideration being given to carrying capacity for watersheds? So PEI is divvied up into several watersheds. Those watersheds have a certain carrying capacity for farming, for tourism, for development, for natural areas, for all of these things. So when you're talking about land use, is this, I mean, I personally think this is something that we could look at as far as when we're developing this new act, what is the carrying capacity for our watersheds? It's great to be profitable and maybe you need more land and whatnot, but you also need to take into consideration that there are other users of the land other than farmers. There are inland fisheries, there's tourism, who use the land by way of going out into the streams. So that's kind of one thing I thought I would bring up. The other thing I thought I would bring up was the definition of a non-resident. I left here in 1996, went to university in Nova Scotia and went up to Nunavut after that and lived up there for 10 years, but always had planned to come back home. The reason why I didn't come back home is because, well, first of all, the North was just a good place to be at the time, and probably still is, but also never had planned to stay there. We have a lot of young people, or a lot of people moving west to work because they need to make money, but a lot of them want to come home, and I am one of these people as far as coming home. So rather than, I don't know what the guidelines are around non-resident and resident landowners. I bought land when I was away. But maybe it should be more about native Prince Edward Islanders and not resident Prince Edward Islanders, or that there should be some consideration for native islanders that have gone away and have lived away for 10 years and are coming back and want to buy 10 acres of land or 100 acres of land and want to start a farm. So I don't know if that's something that's being considered. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea. As opposed to, though from a ways that come and buy land. I think that there's certainly I guess if you're here and you want to buy land, you definitely should be considered how much land you want to buy. But then there are a lot of people who go away, and I'm not saying that they should go away for 50 years and never step foot on the island and then come back and want to buy land, but there are people that are going away for 10, 15 years to accumulate enough money to come home to buy a hobby farm or buy a farm or buy whatever. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing was just about incorporation, and I know this is kind of an issue around having our land incorporated. Is there going to be any discussions on that? Because I think that there are a lot of pros to that. Montague, I live in Kilmuir, and Montague is a very small area, and I live 5 minutes away. All of my services are from Montague. I work in Montague, yet I can't go on council, for example. I can't do anything with Montague as far as sort of being on council because I'm just outside the area.
Maybe I don't understand your...
Amalgamation, yeah.
Oh, well.
Incorporation.
No, we're not dealing with that. Steve, headline. Carver not dealing with amalgamation, okay?
So anyway, that's just, I know that there's a lot of pros and cons for it. I just didn't know if there was going to be any discussion around that, but.
No.
I'm just kind of bringing it up, throwing it out there.
No, we're not dealing with that. I guess just 2 points. In regards the matter of the carrying capacity for watersheds and things like that, this is early in the process of the public hearings, and there are different ways that this could have taken place. I personally wanted, even though this is technically a very formal hearing and Public Inquiries Act and all that type of stuff, I wanted very much for it to be a relaxed setting. So people can make some little presentations like Kevin did, or it can be conversational and all that type of stuff, a good free of exchange. That's the way I want. So it's not specifically highlighted in the terms of reference, but there's enough things in there that I'm interested in what people have to say in that particular thing about the importance of water and so forth. In regards to the definition of non-resident, I really do think that is a few words that is going to be dealing with non-resident an aspect. And pardon me? 183 days. It's 183 days. It doesn't say consecutive and so forth. And these two friends are sitting over here smiling from ear to ear. They think they're going to get me into that type of conversation. I'm not going to get into the conversation about the Senate and qualifications like that. But to be a little bit serious for a moment, in your particular situation, you went away and you would be regarded as a non-resident of the province. There is a very technical legal aspect of where your domicile was. Was it still in Prince Edward Island? Was your domicile elsewhere? I apologize for the legality, but that is some type of an issue. I guess I would think that perhaps your domicile went with you in that occasion to the north. You could buy land if it was land that belonged to your parents. They could convey it to you without getting any executive council approval, because there was an exemption put in. I actually drafted it when I was in cabinet to permit people to transfer land to their spouses and siblings and grandparents and parents and all that type of stuff, and to children, to the grandchildren down the line. To a certain extent, what's happened, Jackie, is that some would argue that people have used that as a loophole or have abused it in certain regards of getting around it, some of the intent of the act, but be that as it may. Then the other aspect is that although it may be some cumbersome to make an application to IRAC and Executive Council, and some people could do it themselves, it's better from what I can see if you get some professional assistance. But if you were away and you decide to come back, or you never came from here and you wanted to come here, what I do when I represent those individuals, I say, here's the application. I'll fill out what needs to be filled out. Talk about the guidelines and the sale, you met them, about the advertising. You write a letter to Cabinet or to IRAC and tell them what it is that makes you tick and why you want to come to live in this province. And folks, I have received some of the most fantastic letters from these individuals about why they want to come to Prince Edward Island. And the power is contained in Section 9 of the Act. The cabinet can put on various restrictions that can happen and so forth. And one of the conditions is that the approval is given, but that the applicant becomes a resident within such a period of time as may be specified in the permit. And that was worded that way because people were all, I want to move to PEI, I want to move to PEI, but they have no intention of moving to PEI really, so that some conditions have been put on that. And I just make the point, I'm married to someone from away, but she knows she'll never be from here because she's always been from away. But you know, our province have wonderful people that have come from away that understand what makes us tick as an island and as islanders, and they have something to add in quality-wise. And I'm glad you came back. I'm glad that you bought some PEI, and thank you for your contribution. Thank you. Now, sorry, I think John Rowe took your seat when you were gone, and my apologies on that. Okay. Yes, please.
I guess I'll take a mic.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi, everyone.
And your name?
My name is Milla Clarks, and I am in no way an expert in any of this discussion. I'm here as a concerned citizen. I live in Belfast, and I have my little inroad and bit of insight into this is I have been making a documentary recently on farming and organic farming, and so I have been doing some research and talking to people, and so I've been thinking about this issue a bit. I guess basically my worry is sort of maybe more broad spectrum, that we are in a global economy and supposedly free market enterprise, and our local farmers who are fairly big but still small in the grand scale, on a global scale fairly small but big for PEI, are struggling with this Land Protection Act because it's limiting their ability to grow, and because they have to compete on a global scale, they're really at a disadvantage. So this idea of free market and competition sort of presupposes that if you're going to play a game, everyone's going to be on the same level, that everyone entering that game has equal ability to play. But unfortunately, in today's reality, global corporations and certain farming corporations have gotten so big that it's not actually a fair and even playing field anymore. And so I very much sympathize with farmers that are larger scale on PEI that need to grow because of it's hard to compete, like I said. But at the same time, I worry that this Land Protection Act is sort of the one thing that's setting us apart from just entering into this massive global fray that's actually not really benefiting farmers anywhere. It's doing exactly what it set out to do, which is to protect our land. And if we open it up, it would be fine, and again, I'm not an expert, and so I'm basing this on my own, thoughts and knowledge, but it would be fine from my perspective if we opened it up and said, all those local farmers that are working here, that have worked here for generations, if they need 1,000 more acres, if they need 1,500 more acres, that's great. I mean, those are people that know this land, they're embedded here, they contribute back to the community. But what I see happening very, very quickly is instead of that being just the end result and them becoming more profitable, that essentially the Land Protection Act is then sort of thrown open, either completely, removed completely, or incrementally, under the guise of having to keep up with the Joneses, having to keep pace with the rest of the world. And pretty quickly, much bigger corporate interests could come in, as you had mentioned. People with limitless pockets, people that are, buying up whole tracts of land in Africa and all around the world, especially as climate change and food sustainability becomes a really big issue. PEI is maybe, I don't know about soil qualities exactly, but it must be pretty good for farming. It is a 1 million acre farm, so they say 400,000 acre farm. So we're a farming community. We have been for centuries. So obviously it's a good place to grow food. So maybe the question isn't, and I mean, it's easy for me to say because I sit on the sidelines. My life isn't on the line. My life, my job, my career isn't on the line here. So it's easy enough for me to say, let's just instead of trying to fit in with someone else's game that isn't even working for people in places like Iowa, where they can have 10,000 acre farms at a time. I mean, even those farmers are struggling. Instead of trying to play their game, is there not a way, because we are unique, because we are an island, and because we have this very unique act that actually does set some guidelines, not to say it's perfect, and I'm sure there's many things that can be discussed and debated, but isn't there some kind of advantage to that uniqueness, or to our uniqueness, that we have this act, we are small, our ecology is a finely balanced system. Maybe we're at an advantage, not at a disadvantage, and maybe there's sort of a new system of agriculture. Easy to say, harder to do, but something to be rethought and retweaked as opposed to trying to jump in to a sinking ship. Maybe we have some strengths here that we don't acknowledge or we don't know yet, and maybe to work with that as opposed to taking away what gives us a certain amount of strength and uniqueness, which is land protection for sustainability, for the environment, and hopefully for our economy if we can be ingenious enough about it. I know that's all very broad and abstract, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, your first name?
Mille, Mille.
I just want to ask some questions and elaborate a little bit here if we could, and so forth. If, I just toss this out to you because it's picking up on sort of in your thought. So if the goal of the statute is to protect land, and we have heard men and women say their experience in dealing with this statute for the past 30 years, there's the red tape component, we'll leave that alone for a moment, and that some of these individuals say they need more land in order to do certain things. And if their desire is the land, to make it profitable for them and to have good crop rotation and everything like this, what would you think of the suggestion that there could be some mechanism to permit people to have additional lands, provided they truly are prepared to have agriculture be tied in, not for 10 years identification we have now, but for 20 and 30 years identification to make sure that their island agriculture can be passed down from one business generation to another business generation.
Absolutely. Like I say, I don't, and again, this is personally, whether I object or not is not really here or there to most people, but I don't object to the idea of expanding certain land holdings for certain farmers that are tied to PEI because it's necessary, because the economy or the market that they're in necessitates that. I think there's wiggle room. I think there's room for negotiation. I'm just worried about broad trends that I see globally that are here, and they're happening here, and I think they could happen here very rapidly if we simply remove one thing that makes us unique and gives us a little bit of control over our land. Did that answer? I don't, maybe I just got off
fine.
there.
It's fine. And I asked this question one other meeting, and it didn't get the takeoff that I thought it might. Try again. Now, forgetting those people that are actively involved in the agricultural community, whether they're big or small and everything else, like I said this in Morel, when I grew up in Hazelbrook, and I felt pretty proud. The Carvers were the largest property owner in the community of Hazelbrook. We had 180 acres of land. Okay. That was something in my mind. When I was a youth, we only had, I guess, about 80, and then 100 acres was acquired. Things have changed in that regard. But forget about those individuals that need to farm or want to farm, and highly commend the individuals who want to farm. Forget for them for a moment, whether they're little or organic or big or whatever the case be. But what about other individuals in this province who aren't in the farming industry and who don't own land that own land that's not in agricultural use. Okay? And I'm talking about going forward, not trying to do anything retrospectively. Horace Carver, lawyer in Charlottetown, do I need 1,000 acres of land in Prince Edward Island that's not being made useful in the agricultural community? Yes? Don't.
To my mind, when 1,000 acres per person, unless they have a hunting range, I don't know. Personally, I don't know. I think it's
And what's your name?
Byron Petrie. I don't really see why it's a bunch of acres if you're not. Maybe forestry, I guess, but.
Okay, I think we're going to have to. We're competing against two things. Your voice is low, and the game is going strong. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you in a second. And would you have any thoughts that you'd like to put in paper, or?
I couldn't presume to. No, not in that topic. I guess just more agricultural, I guess is what I
And I
see.
don't mean to select you out, but that applies to everybody tonight. Whether you are speaking or not speaking, whether you make comments or whatever, more than welcome to receive your comments in writing, and thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Byron? Byron Petrie.
You say that you want to make this comfortable. I can't stand talking in front of crowds, so this is
what we're going to do.
I'll just.
He's a note taker. He doesn't say anything, and you and I are just going to have a friendly little conversation.
Okay.
And if you'd like, you come over here, and we'll put him over there, and we'll just talk. And they won't interrupt us, Byron.
Whisper ear to ear. Okay.
All right.
And I was.
Are you from the Lily Farm area?
No.
No, you're not that.
I don't know that. No. I guess I can only speak to my own experience.
Yes.
And of course, my experience is agricultural. Like, this is why I didn't come up. I don't.
To help you a little bit,
Yeah.
I think I was just suggesting that maybe Horace Carver, a lawyer, doesn't need the right to own 1,000 acres of land in Prince Edward Island unless it's being actively involved in the farming industry. And so, what do you think of that comment?
Well, I guess to my mind, 1,000 acres boggles my mind. It's a huge amount of acreage to me,
Right.
and I can't see any independent citizen owning that. For what? 1,000 acres? That's a lot of acreage. Like,
Well, the way the law is at the present time is that if somebody wanted to, you could have 100 people move to Prince Edward Island, spend 183 days here, and immediately acquire thereafter
right.
999 acres of land. We don't go through executive council. We don't go to IRAC and anything else.
Yeah. So my position, I don't know. I think that's excessive, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well,
so
that's all you can express. That's what I want to hear.
Okay. But so the Land Limits Act. I guess I should say my background. I come from Montreal. I moved here 2 years ago, and I was in welding's my background. I went to school for welding, got sidetracked, but it was the whole back to the land. I was hopefully going to have a hobby farm kind of thing and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, I ended up working on a farm with Reg. And that's my experience in farming. And so I'm not brushed up too well in history of...
Sure.
And...
But you came. You're
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You think you'd like to stay?
And I'm thinking I'd like to stay. And I mean, I've got a bunch of points. I can't make a linear...
Well, why don't we do this, Byron? Why don't you make one or 2 points, and then on another occasion, send me a note or a letter with some of the other points.
Yeah, I'll send you a
And-
letter. I guess to my experience here is there's no young, I couldn't afford a 1,000-acre farm. I can't see anybody my age. I don't know of anybody my age who can afford a giant farm like that. It just doesn't, I can't imagine that. I can't, like, I couldn't even afford the mortgage on the land I own now, which is 12 acres. I can't. It was only through, you know,
Well, next.
so I mean,
Sorry. I was going to say next Tuesday night I'm speaking to the young farmers, and I've enjoyed speaking to groups already and some other groups, but I'm really looking forward to talking to these young farmers
yeah, the young
and
farm,
listening to them.
I mean, the young farmers that I do know, they're all farming 5 acres, even less. Some are 1.5 acres, and I mean, we're not making $250,000, as I know some folks in the paper, anyways, I've read, can believe that. But we're making a living, and I don't see. If you can't make a living off 1,000 acres, I don't know how. Anyways,
All
sorry.
right, well, thank you very
I don't like
kindly.
speaking in front of crowds.
Appreciate that. I'm sorry if I stuck you on the spot a little bit, but
Yeah,
you put some thoughts in paper and send them to me, and I'd love to see them, okay?
Yeah.
Kevin, you've been very patient. You may have even forgotten your point you were going to make a half an hour ago.
Well, it doesn't usually happen, but
I'm coming back to the point that Neil brought up a while ago about the rotation. And then John brought up the point that there was 75% of the island was in compliance with that rotation. My question is, and this is just a question, and that's all I'm trying to bring out. If all the farmers, we're criticizing farmers here pretty hard, but really the whole thing belongs to fishing and to forestry as well. So we got to think about that too. But if everybody was able to purchase that extra land, would they not become a better steward? Would they not buy the land that is actually for good stewardship or good productivity, rather than trying to put something that's non-productive into place? There's a lot of land on Prince Edward Island that is something like the prairies. Like you can go out west there, and there's lots of land out there that they put into grain production, and really it's grassland. It's desert, and we got land that we own under Jasper Wyman's in Maine that if we can't pump onto it thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water, we'd never get any fruit on it. So Prince Edward Island has the opportunity under the good land that's available, but some of this land is non-productive, non-product. There's some real good land on Prince Edward Island that's not producing a thing, and there's other lands on Prince Edward Island that's being worked on that's be better off if we never went into it. So I'm just throwing the question out: is it if it was opened up a little bit more, would we be better stewards?
Thank you. You may have taken that people were being critical of farmers. I don't think we've been critical of farmers, and actually rather respectful of farmers. There's been various comments made, and I still want to hear comments. I might say, just as a little break, that the most surprising comment, in some way, one of the most surprising comments I heard tonight is that I never expected anyone to be talking about the Quieting Titles Act. And Danny McKinnon, I remember being summoned to the Premier's office one day by Premier McLean. And that particular afternoon, he was so preoccupied with the fantastic number of titles, particularly in southern Kings County, that were no good. And a lot of it had to do with passing down and people dying and no wills and all that type of stuff. And there's fair bit of land in PI, I believe, that is not being able to be brought into production because the titles are so poor and people don't want to take the expense and trouble doing it. And I just found it very interesting that you talked about that. I never expected that would ever come up in any of these hearings whatsoever. I thought I'd say that for no particular reason. Anyway, I know there are other people here that have thoughts and so forth. I'm very interested in what you have to say. Yes, sir.
Are you looking for submissions?
Am I looking for what?
Are you looking for submissions?
Absolutely. Would you like to make one now?
Sure.
Please.
I'm sorry I came in late, so I didn't know if there was
No problem. And
waiting list or...
no, there's well, there could be, but you're the top of it. Who do we have the pleasure of dealing with?
I'm David McNerney, and I see a few familiar faces here.
So you're in the blueberry business, right?
Yes, blueberries and honeybees.
Okay. And there was, wasn't there a McNerney person recently that did awfully well someplace?
Yes, there was.
And who's that?
That would be my daughter. She won a gold and a bronze medal at the Special Olympics in South Korea.
Just absolutely
At
fantastic.
World Games, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And Alyssa Chapman, you know, I suppose if I scratch the service back far enough there in Murray Harbor, she's probably relate to me. But it's not wonderful. Congratulations.
Well, thanks very
It's
much.
wonderful.
She
Were you
worked
there?
hard for
Were you
it.
there?
Yeah.
And that
We
must
were
have-
there. Yeah, it was a trip of a lifetime.
Yeah, well, I watched the airport ceremony and everything else, and just absolutely fantastic. I didn't mean to divert you off
No.
here, David.
I was going to say the airport ceremony might be the only time you see the premier fade into the background.
No comment. and Steve, don't print my no comment, please.
So I am requesting that an upper limit to the amount of land owned or otherwise controlled by a corporation be retained by the province of Prince Edward Island. I am concerned about the possible abuse that may result when a processing entity acquires the ability to become a primary producer. It is theoretically possible that the processor could concentrate profitability within the processing side of their operation. This would allow them to produce raw materials for sale to themselves at or below the cost of production. This would then place an unattached primary producer in the untenable position of selling to the processor at a competitive price that is unprofitable and therefore unsustainable. To add insult to injury, or perhaps accomplish the end point engineered by the processor, the farmer or primary producer must sell their land, and the only purchaser willing to acquire an unprofitable farm would be that processor. This abuse is more likely to occur in sectors where the cost of processing infrastructure excludes new entrants and curtails competition. Good examples of this are the blueberry or the French fry processors. Any primary producer in an industry where the processor establishes the field price, as is the case with blueberries, is especially vulnerable to abuse by that processor. One way to avoid creating such a temptation for processors is to limit the amount of raw material they can self-produce. A land ownership limit accomplishes this and is less restrictive than a ban on primary production. Alternatively, a fairer price could be calculated and imposed by the government. I do not have an ideal solution, but I do perceive a potential problem. A finite land ownership limit is a passive and economically sustainable method for protecting the livelihoods of primary producers. I do not have any particular objections to increasing land ownership limits for primary producers. And I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, thank you.
Myself and Kevin have a good relationship with Jasper Wymans, and I don't have not experienced this happening, but I can see where it could happen by an unethical or unscrupulous processor.
David, are you able to help us a little bit, amplify perhaps a little bit here about what type of increasing land ownership limits for primary producers that you're thinking of?
Well, again, I don't know the economics behind some other farming ventures, but I understand that their farm sizes are too small to be economically viable. And I think it would increase their ability to practice good husbandry if they did have larger land and they didn't have to put unproductive land into production and be able to manage it. Like putting an artificial limit on things kind of hinders people. But I guess what I'm saying is I really don't like the idea of processors being in the business of primary production.
Sure. No, I actually picked that point up.
Yeah, that's my only point.
Well, actually, to be fair to yourself, I think you get several points here, and I appreciate it very much. I guess what I want to sort of get at a little bit about increasing increasing land limits for primary producers, non-processors. We have these existing laws right now, 1,000 acres individual, 3,000 equal shareholders and so forth. The government a couple of years ago put in exemptions so that you can have various types of lands exempted from process of, because they're environmentally sensitive, and that includes hedgerows of a minimum of 20 feet and agricultural lands that have been identified in certain areas in regards by planting trees and steep slopes lands and all of that type of stuff and so forth. So those can be exempted up to 40%. So if a person had 1,000 acres, they'd be exempt up to 400 acres. Wymans have applied for and got exemptions up to 1,200 acres because they have 3,000. Okay? And then you have the matter that the present time that you have to count in the leased land, okay, but you can't deduct leased out land. Okay. So do you have any comment on that, those two provisions?
Not really. I think it's a good provision that land that is leased is essentially under the control of the corporation or the individual, so it should be included in their limit.
No, I appreciate that. That's land leased in, okay? So I have 100 acres of land, and I lease it to you, so you have to count that, okay? But you have 100 acres of land for part of your rotation, and you would like to lease it out to Chris Murmas, okay? But the present law says that you have to count in the 100 acres that Carver owns, and you can't deduct the 100 acres that McNerney owns when you lease it out to Murmas. What do you think about that?
On the surface of it, it doesn't seem to be fair,
Right.
but I'm wondering if there's not some reason for it, if you get this circular leasing, that there's is there a way that you can try and get around that?
Well, I think the reason behind it was, and I wasn't there when it happened, is that you might be leasing it to a member of your family, or you're really leasing it technically on paper to Chris Murmas, but it really is you still have control of it. I think that was the purpose behind it. Okay?
That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There was somebody else right here. Yes, sir. And your name?
Daniel McRae.
Daniel McRae.
Complicated issue.
Really?
I guess I just want to. I'm here, so I feel I should say something to put my opinion out there. I'm not a farmer. I grew up in Charlottetown, but I do live in Belfast now. So I, contrary to many young people, I've tried to move to the country, and I've worked a little bit in farming, mostly on small-scale organic farms. But I primarily work in forestry with McPhail Woods, ecological forestry project. And I agree, forestry, there's a lot of things that use our land, and they are all affected by these decisions. Byron, I think you brought up a really great point just about young farmers. Farming is challenging, but it's really fulfilling, and it's excellent. I've loved my experience through forestry and farming, through working with the land. And I think that there's a lot of young people and just a lot of my peers who I know are interested in these kinds of options. But as Byron said, buying a large farm is out of the question. It's you usually inherit those things, and when you inherit that large farm, you inherit the debt that comes with it often, due to the system of agriculture that we've had. And I also very much agree that a lot of these things are systems of scale, where you do have to maintain a certain size. But as Mila said, which I think was really smart, was that we're a small province, and even when we have big farms in our small province, they're small compared to big farms elsewhere. And we're not going to be able to compete in that market in a way that we have very much control or authority over what we're doing. We're going to be following their trends. And it's just like that was talked about in the 90s, when there's a collapse somewhere else in the world, or when a market goes sour, we're the ones who take the brunt of that fallout. And we're struggling to make money when it is going well in those situations, generally, unless it's going extremely well, but that hasn't been the norm. So with this Land Protection Act, I do feel that it is something, and now maybe it's not perfect, but that is keeping land within our hands and allowing us to regulate some of these things. And I know too, I think what you said was really, really smart, just about we've got to look at where we want to go as islanders and why we're living on this island. And my mom's from the island, but my dad's not, and I was born just outside of Toronto. And we moved back to the island because we weren't having a family in Toronto. People were spending their time commuting into Toronto in the GO train, huge hours of working, much higher costs of living, and then you had to work more to compete with those costs of living. And we had family here, so we moved back here so that we could have a family, and that's what I was raised. I moved here when I was about 4, and so I was raised here, and I love the island thoroughly, and I want to stay here. And I don't want to stay here because I think I can make a lot of money. If I wanted to make a lot of money, I don't think I would stay here. And if that was my motivation, and I think that's the way for a lot of islanders. I think we need to make money, and we want to be profitable, and we want to be economically competitive. But at the same time, we want to have this beautiful, pristine land, or what we view as pristine, and we want to have our rivers and our waterways. We want to have our forests. We want to have our communities strong, our rural communities, so that we can stay in these places and come to towns like Montague or Murrell or Belfast. And I think that opening these things up. We already have a really tenuous grasp on our environment, even with the smaller scale farming that's going on. We've got huge amounts of siltation in our rivers. Our waterways are in a lot of problems. We're having increasing amounts of fish kills. We've got brown snow outside because topsoil is blowing around because there's no cover crops. And I think that those are all huge issues, and I think that those are going to be aggravated by opening this up to larger and larger farms, particularly farms, and I'm not talking about the family corporately run farms that are here necessarily. I think that there's a lot of gray areas on this. I'm speaking very broadly. But particularly on farms that don't come from here, when you have companies that are owning the land that don't want to steward it because they're not living there. And I think there's a point where you get too big a scale where you aren't really connected to all of your land, and you're not really focusing on it potentially. I think there's a lot of and how do you enforce all that legislation? I'm not sure, but I do think I don't know. I feel that the Land Protection Act is whether or not it's perfectly doing so, and it needs to be looked at, but it is protecting those things and allowing those smaller scale farms to exist. Because I feel like in 20 years with it all open, if as a young farmer, if my kids are interested in farming and they want to purchase a farm, there's only going to be large tracts of land available, and they're not going to be affordable, and we're not going to have the family farms. We're going to it'll be a place where people come to work out in the country, and most people won't be living on Prince Edward Island, is kind of how I feel in that sense.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about the ramble.
No, thank you. Yes, Erwin. Yeah, you're done now. Are you finished? Okay, thank you. Okay, Erwin J.
Well, I guess I'm in the hot seat and not a very good talker, so.
You're no more in the hot seat than I am.
I started a farm 40 years ago, and nobody gave me anything, I would say. And I'm not a big farmer, but I've probably got 900 or 1,000 acres of potatoes. And I hear about streams not getting clay and silt in them, which I agree is not a good thing. But I think if we had a little more land, we could do a better job. Personally, we're under a 3-year rotation. Some's even 4. And they're
your operation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're talking about the processor, the French fry processor. Not picking on him because we can't get along. We can't get along without him. That's for sure in PEI. But I mean, the way the laws are now, people are doing things to have more land anyway. and it's just being a little bit crooked. So, I mean, in order to, you're not going to keep the processor from getting more land to grow more plates because he's going to do it anyway, and I got no problem with that. But, I mean, we got to get more land in order to get a better rotation, simple as that. The guys out there with 2-year rotation, they probably haven't got enough land. That's why they're doing it.
What?
There has to be a restriction on it, too. I don't think, don't open up wide open. That's not
That's where I'm coming at.
That's not
okay.
the answer.
That's where I'm coming to on this. You know, I've thought about land for 35 years and don't own a square inch. But one of the things that has sort of always amazed me about this Lands Protection Act is that, except for about one case that I'm aware of, which was pretty high profile in like late 1980s, the Court of Appeal discussed about leasing. Really, it's a piece of legislation that hasn't been in the courts, and that there may have been some abuses and quietly and all that type of stuff or violations. But on the whole, this statute has garnered a rather high level of respect among the public. And I think partly that's because we live in a society in which there is a respect for the rule of law. And farmers, generally speaking, I'm sure, don't want to be in violation of that. But I'm interested in this comment because it's something that I was getting at a little earlier on. You know, like you were saying, or when you need some more land and others need some more land.
I'm just using that me for personally. I'm not the only one in PEI.
No. Please, that's no. I'm not. I'm just using it as an example because you put yourself in your own description in the hot seat, but not really in the hot seat. But I'm interested in this last comment. I want some more land, but I don't want it wide open. So you tell me what it is that you would suggest would accomplish both those things.
We'll put it this way. This act took place 30 years ago, right?
That's right.
How many, unless you're going to use Plata farmers now, for example, because they seem to always get the blunt end of the stick for fish kills and that. And I'm not saying they're not all good or bad, that part. But I mean, 30 years ago, how many Plata farmers was from PEI, roughly?
We've seen and heard the stats, and more than we have now, right?
Probably 250. I heard today 255 at a meeting that had nothing to do with this place, nothing to do with this meeting. 255, and that's dropping every year. Matter of fact, it's one or two dropping this year for sure, because one guy sold his farm. So, I mean, if we needed 1,000 acres when we had, say, 500 Plata farmers in PEI for a 3-year rotation, growing probably 50,000 acres of Platas. Now we're growing, say, 85 or 90,000 acres of Platas with 250 farmers. The writing's on the wall. There's not a good rotation.
Please, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to say that you're saying that those people actively involved in farming as a primary producer that are prepared to honor crop rotation, that you want them to see more acreage, but you don't want the gambit wide open across the way, the Carver, a lawyer in Charlottetown, that I could own 1,500 acres and I've got nothing to do with farming?
Well, I guess you want to own the land.
Pardon me?
If you want to own it, you want to pay for it.
And that's okay?
How can we stop you?
Well, that's why I guess you have laws.
If we're under the laws.
Pardon me?
If the law is, you can own 1,500 acres.
If the law permits that, of course. But I'm just picking up on your comment a moment ago that we don't want to have it wide open. So I'm trying to ascertain what you really mean by that.
Right.
You know, that's what I'm trying.
Just talking from a farmer's point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people out there that got more land than they're supposed to have. I'm not saying any names, but I mean, there is definitely people out there. It might be in, you could have yourself.
I could have, pardon me?
You could have 1,500 acres right now.
I don't have a square inch.
Well, but I just said you could have.
Well, I suppose if one to violate the law, I could, but I don't have any land. Don't own any land.
I didn't say you did, but
no, I know.
You could have.
Yeah.
You could have 1,000 in your name, you could have 500 in your son's name. You could have.
Yeah, but neither one's accurate.
Yeah, I just said you could. I'm not saying you
Yeah.
do, or not saying he does or he don't, but
Yeah.
so I mean, there's ways of getting around these here laws, but I mean, I think if we made it that.
Well, that way is not getting around the current law because each of us are entitled to 1,000 acres.
Right.
do you think, from your sense of the agricultural community, is the agricultural community in this province prepared to honor and acknowledge crop rotation? I'm not talking about the 75% that John Jamieson's talking about. I'm saying, what about the individuals, 25% that are not honoring it? What do you have to say about that?
I think some will. They're not all going to be, not going to all have 3 rotation, because no matter what you do, they're not going to, some always could be some not going to follow the rules. We all know that. But I think it would be a help, though.
Okay.
And
So,
I can't see anybody out there either in the blade that's wanting to increase their acres that much, because they can always sell them.
okay. So how much more do you would like to see? Like, how much more the limit?
Went from 1,000 say to 1,500, it'd be a help.
Okay. All right.
And this is a 30-year act. I mean, times have changed. Farmers have changed too. I'm not saying it's for the better either, but they've changed.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, that's what it is.
Okay. Thank you. I know it's moving on a little bit, but I'm more prepared to hear comments. There is an area that I want to get into. We've never got into in any of our public meetings so far, and I want to raise it. And I'm prepared to stay here as long as you would like, and I'm prepared, although there's a limit to that in the sense of a formal meeting, I gather, but afterwards I'm lingering around here. Chris, did you have your hand up? No, you did.
Very short comment.
Sure. Sure. Good night, folks. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
The last chapter talks about the fragile nature of the province's ecology.
Yes.
Okay, and one of the things, quite a number of years ago, I picked up a wee little booklet by the title of Inner Space, and I met the author later on. He wrote the book at the time when they were discovering outer space, okay, and he's looking at what's happening under our feet.
Yes.
And he was saying, like, the biology in the soil, okay, and then one of the comments he made early in the book was something to the effect, if we had spent just a wee percentage of all the money that went on studying outer space, studying the soil ecology, biology and all this, that we would have been probably further ahead. That book was written around 1970, about not even 20 years ago. A woman by the name of Elaine Ingham, as part of her studies, she started looking at the soil not in terms of NPK, not that those things are not important and all the other trace elements, but in terms of the balance between fungi, bacteria, actinomycetes, and all these things. And she's done very interesting work. And back within the last 10 years, Cornell has developed Cornell University in the States, a new soil test. It's called Cornell Soil Test, and it measures things that were not measured before. And I don't know a lot about it, nor do I know a lot about Elaine Ingham and her studies deal with soil food web. But I think it's something that if we want to keep our soils in place, we're going to have to look beyond just NPK in that, and I think it's well worth looking into, and I'll send you a little bit more information on that.
Thank you. The matter thank you very much, Chris. The matter I wish to raise, I know the evening's late, has to do with item 3 of the terms of reference here, the first sentence and a half. Legislative concerns that have arisen involving such issues as land holding limits as they apply to utilities. Okay, so what are utilities? Well, power, electrical companies. Okay, and someone asked, I don't know the land limits of utilities in this province, but the way the present land law is written, and it's written broadly for a reason. It doesn't talk about ownership. It talks about land holding and the definition of land holding. So it includes leases and interests and all this type of stuff and so forth. So electrical companies, to an example, they may have ownership, but they also would have easements, running along roads, going down new subdivisions, and public roads, and all that type of stuff, okay? And so what happens where we got a situation of, and I'm not saying we do, that at some point in time, an electrical company is within sight of 3,000 acres interest in land, and it doesn't take very much to have easement lands add up. And what do people think about the commissioner making a report on dealing with that? You want to have electricity? You're concerned about them violating the land laws? What do you want them to do, folks? Pardon me? Well, we're addressing it right now. Any comments?
Do they pay taxes on that?
I don't think I know the answer to that.
I highly suspect we're not talking about easements, we're talking about windmills.
No,
And how much land we're going to allow them to build windmills on, are we not?
no, no, we are talking about, that could be, but we're talking about utilities as well, Danny, here. Talk about you.
Are the windmills, is this land windmills not owned by the utilities or leased by the utilities? Or again, are we just getting into other companies building the windmills and leasing the land and then selling it to Maritime Electric? It's going to add up. It's going to add up.
It's going to add up. There's no question about acreage and so forth. I'm just saying that that's a component. You know, we've passed out 125 or 150 of these sheets, and no one said boo about it. So I'm just sort of wondering if people aren't interested in reading it, then one of these days I'm going to have to send a little note to Executive Council and ask them what the legislative concerns are.
That was just my assumption when I read it, was
No.
that
My
the windmill situation
No.
would be
Well, it could.
that clause.
It might be able to be included in that. I have to think about that long and hard. Whether a windmill could be deemed to be a utility that situation. I think that one could make a good argument that it's not until such time as the power is sent and processed to the Summerside Electric Company or however it's done. But I'm just saying, that's the question, and that's going to have to be addressed in my report, and I'm interested in comments. Reg.
Where I could see it could be possibly a problem is if they start to put lines through a field or good farmland or cattle or other stuff, because there can be conditions in terms of power source going through there in relation to the dairy cows or engineered cattle. And it's also can be on land where it should be identified by agriculture rather than power lines. Now most of it's along the sides of the roads, which I think probably
You're okay. Yeah. All right. David McNerney.
To me, that once you have a rule, you're always going to have exceptions to a rule or special cases that maybe should be considered exceptions to the rule. And the one that springs to my mind is the Island Nature Trust. You know, I think they exceeded their land limit and they incorporated the second body. I'm not sure how they solved that problem. And would not the province control more than 3,000 acres of crown land? You know, do they fall under the legislation or not?
No. They don't. Okay. The last, last swing of the room. Anybody would like to make comments publicly? I'm going to be here afterwards until the last person leaves. Anthony.
Sorry, my name's Anthony Neighbors.
Anthony Neighbors.
You think of PEI having 1 million acres of ground or whatever it is that we farm, And you think that, I know I farm quite a bit of land in Kings County and part of Queens County, and I know that I would really, if I had my choice, I'd love to see a 4 or 5 year rotation. But the problem is there's not enough land to do that, and we can't afford to do it. But if we take a look at the 1 million acres that we have, and we decided perhaps maybe we should put a tax incentive in place for people that were interested in becoming more environmentally friendly and all of the everything that goes along with it, that they would put their land into a 4 or 5 year rotation if they were given a tax break. Just think of what that might do. I put this on my phone because I didn't have a pen. Just think of what that would do for the economy, because I know that the land, that if you only get a piece of land for 1 year, you really can't do a very good job of farming it, because you can't put the inputs onto it that you'd like to put onto it. So if somebody gives me a 5 or 6 year lease, or if I'm comfortable that I'm going to have that land that long, then that makes it much more valuable, and I can do a better job with that, and I have seen much better crops on that type of land. So I think in your report, I think it'd be really good if you addressed the idea that perhaps we should be looking at getting more cooperative in terms of getting our land into better rotations, and anybody that would be willing to go to a one more year rotation gets a tax credit, and that way the farmer that's looking for land, he then can get that land for the same price, because the other guy's making a little bit of money on saving it on his taxes, and it's. There's not a whole lot of money to be made in this business, and we have to get creative about figuring out a way to bring our yields up, because really that's all we can do. We're going to be farming potatoes on this island for quite a while yet, and soybeans and wheat and whatever, and as far as I'm concerned, prices will go up and down, but the only thing we have control of is yields, and the only way we can control our yields is to make sure that we're able to do the best job possible, and you can't do that unless you have some consistency and you have some control over the land you're using. And we can't all own the land. I don't know whether we should raise or lower the limits. I really, I'm not that awful concerned about that. I think people will find ways around that anyway. But let's try and put some things in place that we can make sure we use the land that we have the very best way possible, so that Irwin can get land for a 4 year rotation if he'd like to go to that, because I'm sure he would agree with me that would be a better way to grow potatoes, but you can't do it because there's not enough land, and this would be one small step towards making that happen, and there would be extra profits for farmers, which in turn will go back to cover the tax revenue that's lost in the process, and it would be much better for the environment. I guess the other thing I want to say is that whenever this process is done, it would be really nice if there was a nice, clear, concise, simple way for farmers to understand these regulations, so they don't get caught with something that they don't have any idea that they're doing it wrong, and they get nailed. And I can speak personally for that, and I bet you there's a lot of people in this room that have the same problem. And so that's my hope, Mr. Carver, that when you put your report out, that you address them two issues, because the way I look at it is we can all talk for a long time, but the bottom line is we need to make some money, and we need to be profitable, and we need to do that in a way that our neighbors and everybody is kind of half pleased with the way we do things. And we've got all kinds of land on PEI, but half of it's not used for potatoes, and half of it's, and maybe, I don't believe in forcing people to make that happen, but I think we can give them incentives to make it happen, and I think that might help a lot. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, and pardon me?
That's well put by a neighbor.
Well, he called me the other day, and I returned the call, and we had quite a conversation. I said, I'd like some of your thoughts in writing, and I said, how about the Montague meeting? And he came in the door tonight, and he says, I'm getting them down, but he says, I haven't typed them up yet, and I have a feeling I just saw the first draft right now. And thank you very much, Anthony, and I am still looking for some of that creativity for your first point, but I can assure you the second point will be addressed. That this whole matter of red tape and existing regulations, and try to increase clarity and to understand process. I do believe that we all desire to honor the law as we know it, and whatever law that might be, and it's very helpful. If one of the things that's I've become apparent of in this process is there's a fair bit of misunderstanding and misinformation out there, and somehow that needs to be clarified. And I didn't have this section right at my fingertips before, but it says this act does not bind the Crown or a Crown Corporation named in the Schedule B or C of the Financial Administration Act. Okay. Thank you very much. I can see that some of you are so helpful and enjoying the process. I see you on more than one occasion, and I really welcome that. And those of you I don't see again, please take a business card here, send comments, and thank you for coming. I very much sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.